Just want to introduce my guest, which is Chris Lundy from the States, and we're going to talk about health today. Hi, Chris. Great to see you. And we've had so many chats.
Indeed, we have. It's a long time coming. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just love to hear your story. Just talk about your story and your dealing with cancer and recovery from cancer and all the issues that I know we're going to go and talk to you about a lot of other stuff that you're involved in, but that is a very strong personal story and very inspiring, I think. I seem to be meeting a lot of people today who seem to be recovered or are helping themselves against all the odds with cancer and all sorts of things. So tell us your story, Chris. Over to you, and I'm going to keep quiet.
Well, for me, my cancer story started from day one. I'm 43 years old, I'll be 44 next month. I was actually born with this disease, and the doctors missed it. Nobody really knew what was wrong. This growth was found on the back of my head. In a previous interview, I said it was my forehead, but I misspoke. But it was in the back of my head, and it wasn't bleeding. There wasn't a problem, and the doctors told my parents that there was no issue. But that was not the case. Unfortunately, within 2 years of my life, I almost went blind. By the age of 2, I had to have emergency surgery to correct what's called a dissociative deviation. It's a glorified way of saying you're cross-eyed, but it's almost like lazy eye in extremis. And I was squinting my eyes almost completely shut at that age. Mother noticed that there was a problem when she had a picture taken of me at a local Walmart in Kentucky when I was barely 2 years old. And so she had me looked at by the doctors, and they said, yeah, this young man needs surgery. And that was just the beginning of a very long period of problems. But in terms of the present day, it got so bad that I had sores up and down my body with this undiagnosed illness that turned out to be brain cancer that turned into spinal lymphoma that permeated my entire lymphatic system. Around this time last year, maybe a little bit sooner, actually a little bit further out, I was on the brink of acute lymphatic acidosis, which is where your lymphatic system shuts down and you die. I came up with a combination of 3 different treatments that I discovered within about 3 to 6 months of each other. And ever since then, I've been on the road to recovery. I went from barely being able to stay up 6 hours a day to working a full day and focusing on treatment. And there's just some scary moments. I can't quantify all of it in one, statement, but we can get to that later in the interview. It's not something I would wish on my worst enemy, or anybody for that matter. It's the depth of the cancer epidemic has been ongoing for well over 50 years now, perhaps longer, but especially since 1970. And I'm a child of the 70s, and that was when major changes were happening to the food supply, major changes were happening to energy, communications, things of this nature. And I would argue that, when you combine bad food with bad energy with bad treatments, you're going to have a bad outcome. And that's what happened to my mother 18 years ago when she passed. I mean, many people in my cancer have died of this disease recently. And, now that I've found a solution, I think it's way beyond time to put a stop to the fear-based messaging behind disease, and to bring people not just a message of hope, but real progress, real solutions, because this conversation is long overdue in the public sphere, and I'm thankful to be able to tell it from personal experience.
Well, it's inspirational. My brother died of cancer, and recently I've met a lot of people who have recovered by themselves, doing their treatments or whatever by their own initiative, even when they've been given the death pill by allopathic doctors. I know one lady told me recently that the doctor dropped his papers and said, "You're refusing our treatment." And she said, "Yes, I am. I've made a choice." And he threw his papers down and he said, "It's people like you who always come back to people like me when it's too late." And, you know, what a thing to say to somebody. I mean, isn't this incredible how the medical profession has got so distanced from its, you know, from its mandate, which is to help heal people.
Yeah, it's turned its mandate into our mandates.
Yeah.
Right. They've flipped it around. They've gone from the Hippocratic Oath to Arbeit macht frei. You know, so
Yeah.
It's definitely a strong degree of coercion, not just in the Western world, but all over the world as it relates to the current state of affairs. Of course, they've toned down on that, and now they're focusing more on other topics, of course. But for sure, there's a need, at least in my view, to provide people and myself, I'm starting with myself and my family, to not just bring the message forward, but to say, hey, you know, well, I'll just go ahead and say the 3 methodologies that I came across. So there's actually 4, but one of them wasn't quite as effective as I was hoping for. The first one, which I did for about 6 months, was Dr. Robert Morse's grape fasting protocol. Now, Dr. Robert Morse is a naturopath. I believe he's based out of Arizona. And I was brought to the attention, his protocol was brought to my attention late 2021, something like this. And I did nothing but eat grapes and maybe soup a few times a week for the better part of 6 months, but my body couldn't put anything else down. And I was getting better. I felt better, but then, you know, things started to get a lot worse around March of last year. And then I discovered Rick Simpson oil, which I'm still taking. I also discovered a medical massager called the Med Massager that when I laid down on top of it, it started to break down the tumors inside of my lymphatic system instantly, which was a huge discovery. And then the third, and probably the most important thing that I discovered, was silver ionization, where I took a tool that called the Wardebator. Actually, I'll show it to you. Let me get it real fast. Pardon me for stepping away from the camera. But this is it right here. You can get it from a company in Florida in the United States of America. It's called the Wardebator right there. The Wardebator. It's got a high and a low setting, and this is the electrical lead. So what I did was I turned it on like so until it flashed. It has a little A23 battery inside of it, so you have to replace it periodically. And then what I did was I took a stack of 4 Canadian silver maple leaves. And you can see this coin here. Right there. It's a Canadian silver maple leaf, 99.99% pure silver. So 4.9 standard. Now 4.9 silver is considered to be medical grade silver. So what I'll do is I'll place this usually on my navel or around on my chest, someplace like this. And then I'll take the electrical lead, I'll touch it here like so, place it on my body and do something like this. And within seconds or a split second, you can start to feel things move around inside of you and come undone. And, you know, blood flow improves. The first time I felt it, it was quite dramatic when I was in the worst throes of my illness, because the first thing I felt when I did that treatment, I literally touched it to my skin. I was laying on my back. My body shook so violently, I could barely hold the tool. I felt like an earthquake had just gone off inside of me, and I felt this flexion and contraction over and over of a tumor that started at the top of my head, went down the left side of my face, through my jaw, through my throat, my lungs, across my pubic bone, down my right leg, and all the way down to the big toe of my right foot. I felt that in that entire area, and it was shocking. But at that moment, I knew that I discovered something pretty significant. So that's those 3 methodologies. Rick Simpson oil.
So what was the first one you said? There was the massage. What was the first one?
The Med Massager. The website is medmassager.com. I'll put that in our private chat.
I tell you what we'll do is we'll put that in the chats afterwards, and I'll put this in in
Yeah, we
the
can put that in the show notes.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
But my aunt had one of these. There's two different models of the med massager. There's a body massager and a foot massager. And I used the foot massager. I basically just turned on the massager, and I put a pillow on top of it, position myself to, next to like a soft surface, like a futon or something like this, and just lay down on top of it. And if you combine that with the silver ionization, the effects are very cumulative and very rapid. And I also noticed when I first started the treatment, I had to pass urines consistently because my thesis, based upon my body's reaction, is that everything that's inside of my lymphatic system is obviously getting obliterated, which improves water flow, and anything that was stuck inside my lymphatic system is being passed through excretion. So you have to drink a lot of water when you're doing these treatments, because it can have a net effect of dehydrating you. So, and that's important for any cancer patient, is to drink large amounts of water. And I've also been drinking distilled water exclusively for the last year and a half. I haven't consumed any tap water or store-bought water after I found out what was in these products, if you want to call them products. So, yes, these three things put together: Rick Simpson oil, the medical massage, and the silver ionization. Absent the med massager, I also have a bed that my aunt let me use. I live with family, and it has the frame has a massager built into it, so you can simply use a remote control, power it on, and then lay on your bed, and you get the massage while doing the silver treatment. And that's been my standard of care probably for the last 6 to 8 months. That's how I've been taking care of myself ever since I discovered all of these things. And I'll take like 1 maintenance dose of Rick Simpson oil per day, which I will be upping at some point once I get more made. I'm going to be making it myself this year, but in the past I've been getting it from a friend of mine up until this point.
So, I mean, that's a long time. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, so how long have you been doing this now? What's the period?
I discovered the silver treatment last April. So I've been doing that since last April. So about 14 months now. The massager stuff I discovered in September. So that's been going for, let's say, about 9 months. And the Rick Simpson oil I've been doing for about 1.5 years. But the Rick Simpson oil by itself wasn't good enough. You can recover from cancer with Rick Simpson oil by itself. But when you had the amount of brain cancer I was dealing with, which my head looked completely different when I started the treatment, it was about twice as big as it is now, just vertically and around. I would have needed much larger doses to do Rick Simpson oil by itself. Like if you have advanced glioblastoma, which is what I had, you're talking anywhere from 3 to 6 grams of Rick Simpson oil per day. And I was at the beginning taking about 1 gram per day. So not an ineffective dose, but it wasn't effective based upon the progression of disease I was dealing with at the time. So that's how I knew that I needed to do more than one thing to get well, because I was diagnosed and the problem was identified very late. I was stage 4, and there was nothing that doctors could do for me anyway. So either I came up with this, or I was going to die.
When was that?
Those were the circumstances I was facing. I had to figure it out myself.
Chris, when was that, though? You were diagnosed stage 4?
Age of 41, 42 years old, something like that. Actually, I went through some historical radiographs because my finances have not been good over the course of the last couple of years since I lost my career in September 2021. And the most important thing that I was able to pick up from that time, between the time I lost my job and the time I discovered Rick Simpson oil, was what happens to you when you're in the end stages of illness. But that's when I was diagnosed, was in 2021. So I've known about the problem formally for 2 years, but we went over historical radiographs that were taken in the 1990s, my doctor and I, and my doctor looked and said, "Chris, when were these taken?" Like when I was 18 years old. Like, "Chris, that's a lymphoma in your lungs right there." What? You know, it's I just felt betrayed. I felt very upset that this problem has been there for that long at a minimum, and no one said anything to me. And my doctor spotted it in less than 5 minutes based upon radiographs from a quarter of a century ago. So, yeah.
So, how much time do you dedicate a day to treating yourself?
Hours. You know, I'm on the massager with the silver treatments for anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a day. When I'm not doing treatment, or even when I am, I'll have my phone on me, you know, messaging people, Telegram, or taking care of my day-to-day. And if I have to do something, I'll hop up and go do it. But there was a time, like last year, that I was not able to get out of bed for about 3.5 months. Physically, right. I was not able to get out of bed. That's how weak I was. And at that point, I was going, you know, anywhere from 12 to 16 hours a day because I couldn't do anything else. I was, you know, housebound, basically.
No energy. Yeah.
Yeah, that was too weak, you know. And not only that, like, if I had energy and I went to go do something outside, like drill a T-post into the ground to build a fence, or go weed, or dig a hole to amend some soil, my heart rate would skyrocket, like to anywhere from 150 to 180 BPM. Very unhealthy, high blood pressure situations, and I would get very dizzy. One time I almost fainted. One time I did faint. I lost consciousness and came to right before my head was about maybe 6 inches from the ground. So it just wasn't safe for me to exert myself around this time last year. I was very much on the brink. It took me about 6 months of consistent treatment to where I felt healthy enough just to travel or to walk, frankly. So.
Right. But you had but with your head, you managed to bring everything down, didn't you? So.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly easy. When I first started healing, the thing that I noticed more than anything else was the fact that it felt like I was lighting my body on fire from the inside. But that just went to show how completely captured my lymphatic system and my body was by this illness. And when I first started seeking help, I sought it from a friend of mine. And this person brought the idea and the practicum of energy healing into my intellectual as well as my physical consciousness and day-to-day existence. And that was really the starting point for me to put together all these theoretical and practical ideas, and then make something that, when you combine all three of those things together, work very practical.
Mm. Well, it's a remarkable story. When I've spoken to you, I've been incredibly inspired by you, just talking to you, what you go through, what you do to heal yourself. And as I say, I'm always astonished. I've met a couple of ladies who've healed themselves from cancer. And it's just a credit to you all that it gives hope when so many people have no hope and they lose hope. So how do you feel? This is an ongoing process. It's going to be for a while, but you feel you're going to heal yourself completely. I can tell that.
Well, I mean, just in terms of the way my body looks, and also my stable weight continues to go higher, like, 5 pounds a month, another 5 pounds, a few months down the line, but the amount of food I'm consuming is about the same. My protein needs have gone way up since I've been exerting myself more. But my stable weight is closer to 200 pounds instead of about 180 or 170. At one point, my weight dropped all the way down to 155 pounds at the worst of this. And that was scary. I don't remember how long ago I was that light. but I looked like a concentration camp survivor. It was really frightening, and I am glad that that part is done. But I have pictures that can go over, the before and the after that we can share later if you want to put those in the show notes.
Well, I think that, at the end of the day, all you're doing is giving a story of hope. And I think today in this world, that's what we need, is hope. And not only hope, but practical actions of how we deal with
Right.
things. I remember when my brother was dying, he kept on seeing, everyone kept on saying it was the drugs. And he was saying, it's not, I know there's a green shoot in my garden. The rest is brown, but I know it's there. But I kept on saying, well, you've got to find that green shoot, because that's the way out. Yeah. What's your view on, I know that a lot of people don't like your approach. How do you feel about that? I mean, you don't feel the system was going to give you any help, did you?
Well, look, I've been a prisoner of the system before. I was kidnapped medically in 1990 by the state of Colorado. So I got a firsthand view of what it means to trust the experts, right? Because these people are experts at poisoning children, human trafficking, and convincing courts and parents that they were doing it for their own good. So I got to stare the face of evil in the United States, and the secret prison state that I heard about and read about as a very young child towards the end of the Cold War in the 80s. And I heard countless stories of survivors of communism from East Germany, from Poland, Lithuania, places like this, but mostly from East Germany, that I would talk to when I was young, like 9, 10 years old. And so the opinions of others don't really matter in this context, because I was stolen from my family under coercion, put in solitary confinement as a child for not just a couple of days, but months. Almost, I'd say it's probably spent at least 6 months to a year of my life in solitary confinement. No adjudication, no charges, no nothing. I was basically just their lab rat. So anybody that trusts the establishment is, as far as I'm concerned, a Faustian bargain. And if you're operating all of your principles based upon trusting someone else's intentions, you have completely given away all of your power to these people, 100%. And one thing that I wanted to note was in 1990, when I was first in prison, the first thing they told me was that I would be there for 2 weeks and then I would go home. Does that sound familiar? 15 days to slow the spread, 2 weeks to slow the spread. Yeah, because I didn't know it at the time, but it's a psychological warfare manipulation tactic, because an adversary knows that if they can get you to do exactly as you're told for 14 consecutive days, that you will comply with any order they give from that point forward. That's why they did the 14 days first. So anybody that is looking for health from the very same people that are trying to start World War III, that are trying to tear Europe apart through this proxy war in Ukraine, or all the other geopolitical stuff, to me, it just goes to show that if you allow yourself to be manipulated, you will be. If you don't take responsibility for your own actions, someone else will do it for you to your detriment. And unfortunately for me, I found out in a way that perhaps no one should have to find out, but I didn't have to wonder about it anymore at that point. So
was that Colorado? Were you in Colorado Springs down there?
No, it was in Pueblo, Colorado, actually.
Oh, Pueblo, right, yeah.
I did live in the vicinity of Colorado Springs as an adult later on, like in the early 2010s, for not very long, but no, I didn't. That particular facility was not in Colorado Springs. It was in Pueblo. It was called the first place I went was what is now referred to as Colorado Mental Health Institute at Pueblo.
Okay.
Which is the biggest misnomer there is. It's a giant prison for children. and they had contracts with a local hospital where they would take these kids that were medically kidnapped and they'd send them straight over there for solitary confinement or drugging. Everyone was put on Prozac and Thorazine, everyone without exception. There was no diagnosis. They just threw you on Prozac and Thorazine instantly. And now we know that Prozac causes suicidal ideation in young people. It causes cancer. It's 95% stannous fluoride. It's pure poison. So after that, I went to El Pueblo Boys Ranch. And if you look online for El Pueblo Boys Ranch, this facility was shut down 5 years ago, but it was allowed to operate for almost 60 years. 60 years. And there was a woman, her name is Lisa Mitchell, that blew the whistle on this place back in the 2010s when her son, Samuel Mitchell, who, as far as I know, still lives in Colorado, was taken into this facility. What happened to him was far worse than what happened to me. But I mean, they would knee strike him, elbow strike him. They would actually play children against each other in cockfights and bet on it. That's how sick these people were. And interestingly,
I saw a different side of Colorado. I was in Denver for 5 years.
But it's the same in any state in the United States that has these so-called child welfare situations. And I've heard of medical kidnappings happening in the UK, heard about it happening all over Western Europe. And no one's been held to account for it. And now we know why, because it was all part of this wider agenda. I equate my experience being locked up in these institutions with kind of the model for the prison state that the establishment wanted to expand everywhere else. But they had to start with children because their number one goal is to get you to obey everything they tell you to do. And I was lucky to get out. The only reason I got out is because I caught them perjuring themselves to a judge when they withheld evidence and extracted a confession out of me by way of coercion. And after that, I just stopped complying with everything that they asked me to do because I knew that they had bad intentions. But it was, I've had to fight a war with the establishment my whole life. So this isn't a new thing for me.
But the main thing is about your health, because I know there's a lot of stuff that you can share about, which we want to get into in other interviews. But primary purpose of this is to inspiration and hope to people who I know my brother was given the death sentence. I mean, he took the death pill, and that was it. And I think any option, because I used to say to him, there are people who've recovered from terminal cancer, but you have to find them and find out what they did. The system isn't going to give you that. He was very, it is. I mean, when I've spoken to you over the time about various subjects, I've always been so impressed with your commitment to healing yourself and the positive vibe that you give out. And I think that's so important for people. And I heard that from this lady, she just said, no, I'm not going to take what you're asking me to take. I don't believe in it. And I think it takes huge courage to do that, because it means you're taking the power to yourself, not handing it over. So what else would you like to say about your health and how you've spent a lot of time now dealing with as you say, stage 4 terminal, 4 cancer, and you feel that your body is really, I mean, you say it's gained a lot of weight, but you're getting more energy. So there is a change. And you said with your head, there was a remarkable change in that, I think, wasn't there, physically?
Well, I'll just start with like the physical manifestations of what I feel. Well, the best way I can describe how this healing process works with lymphoma, what I was dealing with, is like, it feels like I've popped an enormous balloon inside of my body and it's slowly draining away. So there's less pressure behind my eyes. My face feels warmer. There's more color in my face. I stand up straight for the first time in my life. I don't walk bow-legged anymore. which was something that I always struggled with, even as a young boy. My feet point straight ahead now, and I have a higher capacity for water consumption. I don't have problems with asthma anymore. Every aspect of my health is improved in terms of that. But the biggest battle is the mental health part, right? Because if you know, if your soul is kind of a symptom, you're the condition to a certain extent, I would say. And I was definitely suffering for a long period of my life, from what I mentioned earlier. And I was rather, uh, for lack of a better term, black pilled. I didn't see a way out, and until people started approaching me a couple of years ago, saying, "Chris, give this a try, or give this a try," and I was willing to do it because I just didn't know where to turn. And if it wasn't for the help of others, both inside and outside of my family, um, I would probably not have made it. But I did get those things, so I'm grateful for them. Many people don't have those resources. Um, but what I can say about my mental health is that, for me, the biggest benefit that I've discovered from this process is the healing power of the cannabis plant, and it will be with me the rest of my days. And I will that's going to be the number one thing that I promote and testify to people about, is that I was using cannabis wrong. Most people smoke cannabis flower, for its psychoactive or for its depression ameliorating effects. But when you smoke cannabis flower, you're destroying all the terpenes, all the polyphenols, all the everything that makes it beneficial for you cellularly. Now there are benefits to it. Inhalation, it clears out your lungs. It has the mood-based effects. But whenever you make Rick Simpson oil, and everyone should get on YouTube and go to search for "Run from the Cure," the Rick Simpson story. I've watched that for the first time 2 years ago on YouTube. And interestingly, some copies of that video are now age restricted.
Oh, right.
I don't know why that is, but I think we know why. So I downloaded a flat file copy of it from Internet Archive so that I could distribute it in case the censorship gets any worse. But now I understand why the censorship is so intact, is because I've been using cannabis for about 24 years of my life, off and on, not consistently, but off and on. And I did not, if I wasn't aware of this oil when it was invented in 2003, how many other people that use cannabis aren't aware of it? Because there's a huge market for this product. But people are really missing the point of what it can actually do for you. So, and not to mention the cannabis plant, paper made from a cannabis or hemp plant was used for the printing of the Declaration of Independence, the printing of our Constitution. This plant lies at the very center of American history, and it was George Washington himself that said, "Take the hemp seed and sow it everywhere." This was in the 1790s, so maybe we should start paying attention.
So that's, I think what we'll do is, I think it's, what would you say to people who are recently diagnosed with cancer? What message would you give to them? Because the mental health state is a key factor, and you say you've had a lot of support. That's amazing, because some people don't get that support. But what would you say to people out there who have got cancer? That's the key message, I think, today.
Well, everyone's situation with cancer is different. Some people have different manifestations of cancer. So I can't speak to every outcome there. But what I would say to the standard average lay person, or anyone, you really get brought down a peg whenever you have a life-threatening illness, regardless of your income levels. But whether you have resources or not, the first thing I would say is read as much as you can about the healing properties of Rick Simpson oil. Watch as much as you can about that, and investigate the treatment methodologies that I've put together myself, if you have an interest in doing so. But I would also caution to say that, you know, there's a lot of love out there in the world, and I think that people have forgotten how to do it professionally and personally. There's not a lot of in my personal view, sympathy for people that are going through this. There's just this auto response, especially from you know, those around you that may still believe in the establishment's cancer narrative, that assume it's a death sentence, and to get your affairs in order, write your obituary and call it a day. You know, I would encourage people not to do that, because let's face it, you know, for those in the know about what we're going through worldwide today, health is at the very center of this you know, battle between centralization and decentralization. But from a practical standpoint, find people that make Rick Simpson oil. I know people in the UK that make it, only one at this time, but there's that. Also, Rick Simpson himself took his campaign about the knowledge that he was able to, you know, put out there from his oil to make Rick Simpson oil the standard of care throughout all of Europe for opioid addiction recovery, not amelioration or treatment, but full recovery. So the solutions to the problem are much simpler than people realize, because if you consume medicine that has a stronger energetic frequency than the disease that you're dealing with, you're not going to be diseased anymore. So that's something. And also is mind your diet, and mind what you put into your body. You know, I grow as much of my own food as I can possibly grow. I mean, depending on the health level that you're dealing with, if you catch it early, stage 1, stage 2, you can probably still do your day-to-day. And if you can get that food grown, get yourself some cannabis seeds, get them grown, especially indica dominant versions of cannabis seeds, and go to Rick Simpson's documentary. It will show you exactly how to make that oil. Personally, I think a good personal stash of it is about anywhere from 100 to 200 grams. But myself, I mean, yeah, I just wanted to tell the audience that one of my close friends, his name is Todd Pittner. He has a podcast he does with Mike Adams, the health ranger, who the founder of Brighteon.com. I approached him after he got a sepsis infection on one of his legs that he was advised to go to the emergency room to treat. I was like, don't do that. You won't get out of that place. Put some Rick Simpson oil topically on top of that wound and take about 1/3 to 1/2 gram a day until the infection is gone. And the infection disappeared in 4 days. 4 days. This was a potentially lethal infection that was gone. I'm not talking, you know, treated, but completely gone in 4 days' time. So, you know, I've saved one person's life that I know of, other than myself. And for me, one person is enough, but it's not enough in terms of the momentum that needs to, in my view, be there for others. Don't discount what has saved other people's lives, and don't touch chemotherapy at all. I mean, I don't know what the exact numbers are on chemotherapy in terms of its efficacy profile, but the information that I have come across in the past, I can't paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me, but it's a very low success rate, to the point of where it's basically a rounding error. And many chemotherapy drugs have warning labels on them indicating that they're carcinogenic. So why would any physician give you a carcinogenic substance if you have cancer, unless they're trying to kill you? You know, and so you have to ask yourself these types of questions, like, who has my best interest at heart? And really, your heart has your own best interests at heart. You know, don't get to a point where you can't believe in yourself anymore, and believe in the power of spirit. And if you're a Christian, the power of the Lord. If you're a Muslim, the power of Allah. Whatever your background is that drives you, draw strength from that, and then others will draw strength from your story. That would be how I would approach it if I was speaking to somebody in the room right now. Of course, I'm very passionate, and I don't really have a tendency to mince words. But that said, I have faced the end. I faced it square in my face, and I came through it. So that's why my integrity and why my information has been sought out by more people, is because they've seen the images, they've seen my story, and I don't want, I was not able to save my grandmother's life, my grandfather's life, my mother's life. My mother died of cancer 18 years ago. And I will never forget how quickly she declined after she started chemotherapy. So I would strongly advise people to stay away from these toxic drugs, because they're, if the efficacy profile is what these medical establishment people claim, we wouldn't be in the situation at all right now. All this money we're giving to cancer societies, why are we still doing this? It's like, how much money do they need to figure out this problem?
I understood yesterday when I was with people who are in the medical thing that there is this conference taking place in the States where people have recovered from cancer like yourself, and they're taking other, the remedies that are not outside the system, and it's being successful. It's interesting, a little bit of background on me, that I went out with a lady who worked with a guy called Dr. Mossman, who was an allopathic doctor from Texas, I think, and he wrote The Black Butterfly. And this is in the 70s and 80s. I think in the 80s, when they tried to deal with cancer by breaking the ego, they'd make you become the song or make you become the dance. It was, and he had successful, I think they had some remission with that. But you're doing very practical things to improve your health, and that's amazing. And I have, every time I talk to you, I'm inspired. So I think we can have a chat after this, but what would be great is if you could give me all the links that are possible that people can use. And if there's anything else you want to add, great, let's add it now, and then we'll close the interview and then have several other interviews on the things that you're very, very good at. You're a specialist.
Indeed. Well, I'll just go ahead and put this in our private chat. So you'll just do a search for Run from the Cure, the Rick Simpson story. Everyone should have a look at that documentary. It's on YouTube. It's on Rumble. It's on most, I don't know if it's on BitChute, but it's on most of the streaming platforms. That's number one. Number two is read Robert O. Becker, about Robert O. Becker. He was a doctor. I believe he was the head of orthopedics at SUNY, State University of New York. And he is the person that silver ionization treatments for osteomyelitis and it came through. So he was the original inventor of silver ionization treatments. And this was back in the 1970s when he was doing this work. So, yeah, Dr. Robert O. Becker, that gentleman, he wrote 2 books that I think are very instructive. One is called Cross Currents. The other is called The Electric. So I'm just putting those in our private chat so you can reference those later. Those 2 books, I think, are necessary reading if you want a more abbreviated approach as to his protocols. There is a website called silvermedicine.org that goes over that. Dr. Becker utilized copper, gold, and silver as part of his ionization experiments, and he found silver to be the safest because silver has the highest electrical conductivities of all metals, stronger than copper and gold. And it's effective at lower levels of current, because if you wanted to ionize other metals, some metals are highly unsafe to ionize. You try to ionize steel, you kill yourself. You just burn yourself up. So that's helpful. And also I've already provided the link for the men massager. That website will take people to the massager that I've been using. But those links right there, and the books by Dr. Becker, the documentary by Rick Simpson, also phoenixtears.ca. That is Rick Simpson's website. It's my understanding that he at one point published the protocol for the manufacture of Rick Simpson oil. Yeah. I don't know if it's still there though, but the protocol as well as the manufacture method should be posted either on the documentary page itself on YouTube or on that website.
Brilliant. Chris, you've been, I've kind of just lost the thing on StreamYard here. You've been brilliant. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Stay on the line because we can chat. Thank you for all your input. Chris, you're an IT security, internet security specialist, also understands cryptocurrencies very well. And we're going to have chats on those in the near future. So speak to you shortly. All right, I'm just going to end the recording now. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.